This is Donald Trump, the 45th and, God willing, 47th President of the United States. On May 30th, 2024, a date which will live in infamy, President Trump was convicted on 34 felony counts of falsifying business records in the first degree. To put it in the simplest terms possible, each count is related to a specific business document. For example, on February 14, 2017, Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's lawyer at the time, submitted an invoice to Trump. That's one count. Then there was an entry in the detailed general ledger and another entry in the same ledger. That's two more counts. And then a check was written to Michael Cohen, which is another count. In a statement of facts, Alvin Bragg writes, "The defendant, Donald J. Trump, repeatedly and fraudulently falsified New York business records to conceal criminal conduct that hid damaging information from the voting public during the 2016 presidential election." The damaging information was that Donald Trump allegedly had a sexual rendezvous with actress and director Stormy Daniels. Miss Daniels extorted Trump weeks before the election, threatening to go public with her story. And she was paid off to keep quiet, and that payoff was not illegal. But there's a big problem with Alvin Bragg's facts. These records were created between February 2017 and December 2017. And if you look at a calendar, you'd know that the 2016 election took place before any of those records were created. So how could any of these records have influenced an election that happened months prior? Did they somehow travel back in time or something? Ellie Honig, the senior legal analyst for CNN, writes, "This case was an ill-conceived, unjustified mess. The charges against Trump are obscure and nearly entirely unprecedented. In fact, no state prosecutor in New York or Wyoming or anywhere has ever charged federal election laws as a direct or predicate state crime against anyone for anything. None. Ever." And the reason for that is simple. In 2016, Donald Trump was running for president, and the crime of unlawfully influencing the presidential election is a federal issue. New York State has no jurisdiction over federal election law. Furthermore, if there was a crime, don't you think that federal prosecutors and Joe Biden's DOJ, don't you think that they would have charged Trump with any of these violations? I mean, they've charged him with just about everything else, right? So Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts, and each count carries a maximum of 4 years in prison, which means that Donald Trump could theoretically be sentenced to prison for 136 years. And that's not hyperbole. The judge in the case could absolutely do it. Here's CNN legal analyst Norm Eisen on Pod Save America.
He may go to jail. I think there's a serious prospect that he's going to get a jail sentence, and if he's not reelected, that he serves that jail sentence.
What makes you think that jail is really on the table here?
The reason I think that a jail sentence is on the table is that I looked at 10,000 of these FBR, falsifying business records cases in New York since 2015. In the most serious cases, and this is the most serious FBR case in the history of the state of New York, in the most serious cases, defendants do get jail time.
My prediction is that the Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg and his office are going to request jail time. And considering how biased Judge Merchan was against Trump and his defense team during the entire trial, he's going to sentence Orange Man Bad to wearing a matching Orange Man jumpsuit. But thankfully, and it's probably going to take a while, but this case is likely going to be reversed on appeal. Here's Trump attorney Will Scharf on This Week with George Stephanopoulos.
Again, we're going to be vigorously challenging this verdict on appeal. We think we have ample grounds to. I think some of Judge Merchan's evidentiary decisions really throughout the conduct of this trial were frankly astounding. not allowing Brad Smith to testify the way that he wanted. This is one of the world's leading experts on federal election law, severely limiting the scope of examination of Robert Costello, who I believe had absolutely damning information about the prosecution's case. On decision after decision after decision, Judge Merchan, I think, departed from normal courtroom procedure, normal courtroom practice to essentially stack the deck against President Trump. And again, these are all issues that we're going to raise on appeal. We're going to raise them vigorously, and we believe that we're going to win.
And everyone knows that this case is going to get destroyed in the appeals process, even if it has to go all the way up to the Supreme Court. But for now, and for the foreseeable future, the left and the news media, same thing, are gleefully referring to him as a convicted felon. Here's a montage.
Donald Trump, the twice impeached former president and current Republican nominee, is now running as a convicted felon.
2 words, convicted felon.
Convicted felon. He is a convicted felon.
Donald Trump guilty as a felon.
Convicted felon.
The 45th president of the United States is now basically convicted felon.
Donald Trump, twice impeached, convicted felon.
Technically, he is a convicted felon. Legally speaking, a convicted felon.
Donald Trump will now campaign for president in this country as a convicted felon. Convicted felon, a former president of the United States, like any other convicted felon. A convicted felon, convicted felon.
The former leader of the free world, Donald Trump, now a convicted felon.
The former president of the United States, Donald J. Trump, the presumptive Republican presidential nominee, a convicted felon.
He is now tonight a convicted felon.
And he's a felon now.
Donald Trump is a convicted criminal.
He is a convicted felon.
Convicted felon.
He's a convicted felon.
Donald Trump is a convicted felon. And now a convicted felon. Donald Trump is now a convicted felon.
Do we want to be represented, to be led for the first time in history by a convicted felon?
A former president of the United States, now a convicted felon.
And he became a convicted criminal.
You don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office. You don't want a convicted felon in the Oval Office. You don't want a convicted felon to turn the Oval Office and the federal government into some kind of a racketeering operation.
We do know that a convicted felon can become president of the United States.
And he's now been convicted. He's a convicted felon.
A convicted felon.
Look, the fact is that being a felon is not good.
A president or an ex-president become a convicted felon. That's nothing for anybody to have a lot of joy about.
Donald Trump has been found guilty. What does this moment mean?
Could you say it again slower for me, please? It would be lovely.
Guilty.
Yeah.
All 34.
Could you say it again slower for me, please? It would be lovely.
It's a very sober moment for the country and a very sad moment.
Oh yeah, everyone is so somber. Like Whoopi Goldberg and her co-hosts on The View, who could hardly contain their sadness.
Donald John Trump.
Don't tell me.
Is a convicted felon.
Yep, it was a sad day for America in more ways than one.
Let me ask you a question for those of you sitting at home who listen to this show. What was the underlying crime? What did the jury find Trump was trying to cover up with this falsified business record? Was it federal election campaign law violations? Was it tax law violations? Was it additional business records violations? Do you know? No, you don't. Neither do I. No one knows. Neither does Donald Trump. Good luck. Good luck filing your appeal.
And Megyn Kelly is not being hyperbolic here. Even after Trump's conviction, we literally do not know what the underlying crime was. And we don't know because back in March 2023, when the Trump indictment was announced, District Attorney Alvin Bragg didn't actually reveal what the underlying crime was.
I'm wondering if you can specify what laws were also broken.
Right. So let me say as an initial matter, the indictment doesn't specify that because the law does not so require.
Translation? I'm not going to specifically tell you what crimes were broken because it's a secret. And to make matters worse, the 12 jurors weren't told either. The jury instructions state, in determining whether the defendant conspired to promote or prevent the election of any person to a public office by unlawful means, you may consider the following: violations of the Federal Election Campaign Act, otherwise known as FECA, the falsification of other business records in the second degree with intent to defraud, or violation of tax laws. You need not be unanimous as to what those unlawful means were. In other words, the ladies and gentlemen of the jury didn't have to come to the same conclusion as to the motive. You could have had 4 that believed that Trump violated tax laws, 4 that believed that he violated federal election law, and 4 that believed that he falsified business records in the second degree.
What is the crime? There was a menu of 3 possible crimes. You could pick which ones and you didn't have to agree. Right. This is a DA and a judge that went after and a jury that went after the person, not the crime. And that puts a cinder block on the scales of justice.
And this is how insane this was. The jury was asked to consider which of these 3 crimes Trump committed, even though Trump wasn't charged with any of these crimes.
But why weren't there those crimes charged? Why wasn't he charged with those crimes?
Well, I'm not going to go into our deliberative process on what was brought. The charges that were brought were the ones that were brought. The evidence in the law is the basis for those decisions.
So just think about this. You're on a defense team trying to defend your client, and you go into a trial without having been told what the underlying crime is.
Yeah, there's some real appellate issues here that are serious questions about why didn't the defense even know what the charge was that they were going to be applying, what law that was going to be applying.
Which of these 3 underlying laws?
Exactly. And so there were a lot of questions for the defense going into this, I think, as they were making their closing arguments, not even knowing sort of what the law that they were going to be battling over was.
And not revealing what the underlying crime supposedly was is one of the many reasons why the Trump verdict is going to eventually be reversed on appeal. But it's not going to be an easy process.
Now he's got to go up to the appellate court and try to guess, I don't really know what I've been found guilty of. I guess falsifying business records through unlawful means, and the unlawful means were, I don't know. I don't know.
And this is why Republicans do not care that Trump is now a convicted felon. Everyone knows that this was 100% a political show trial. Here's Senator J.D. Vance on the matter.
I really, standing here, it's been 24 hours, cannot believe that the New York prosecutor, a city that is rife with crime, cooked up 34 felony counts based on a literal bookkeeping violation. The argument here at its root is that somebody who worked for Donald Trump, not even Donald Trump himself, filled out paperwork in the wrong way. So they're trying to throw him in prison at the height of a presidential election.
And whether it's true or not, this case reeks of involvement and collusion from the highest levels of the federal government. For example, months before the Trump indictment, it was announced that Matthew Colangelo, the acting associate attorney general for the Department of Justice, was leaving his position to become senior counsel for the Manhattan District Attorney's Office.
Do you believe that the president was directly involved in some kind of an effort to stand up the charges and the trial?
I don't know if he was directly involved in it, but we know he was indirectly involved in it because the number 3 person at the Biden Department of Justice left the DOJ to go join the New York prosecutor's office and actually go after Donald Trump.
And leaving a senior position at the DOJ for a senior position at a local DA's office is not a lateral move. It is a step down. And whether there is any truth to it, it looks like there was coordination between the White House and the highest levels of our government and the Manhattan DA's office. And I'm sure that Congress is eventually going to ask the following. Was Matthew Colangelo promised anything in return? Maybe a position at the White House during a potential Biden second term? Again, who knows? But one thing is for sure, this case stinks of political motivation. But the good news is, it's already backfired on Democrats. Bigly. Within just 24 hours of the verdict, the Trump campaign received nearly $53 million in grassroots donations. More than 1/3 of those donors were people who had never donated to Trump before. And by Sunday morning, Team Trump announced that they had raised a staggering $200 million. And if you think that's a lot of money, just wait until Judge Merchan hands down Trump's sentence. Things are going to get lit. So the day after the verdict, creepy Joe Biden decided to weigh in, responding to the opinion from the right that this was nothing but a political show trial and that, yes, it was rigged.
That's how the American system of justice works. And it's reckless, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible for anyone to say this was rigged just because they don't like the verdict.
You're right. You shouldn't say that our justice system is rigged. Unless you're Joe Biden's wife.
Think of the Supreme Court. For God's sake, talk about things getting worse. Can you imagine if we put any more Republicans on the Supreme Court? No. We will lose all of our rights. So we're talking about women's rights, gay rights. I mean, we will lose our rights and freedom. Voting rights. Yes,
All of this is up at stake.
Translation? Dr. First Lady is saying that Republicans are stacking the deck, rigging the court, if you will, by appointing justices that they like to get the verdicts they like.
Our justice system has endured for nearly 250 years. And it literally is the cornerstone of America, our justice system. The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down. It's as simple as that.
However, I need to point out that during his White House residency, Joe Biden has had zero qualms about attacking the Supreme Court whenever they rule against him.
It was 3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, who were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country. Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law. It's a realization of an extreme ideology and a tragic error by the Supreme Court, in my view.
The justice system should be respected, and we should never allow anyone to tear it down.
With this decision, the conservative majority of the Supreme Court shows how extreme it is, how far removed they are from the majority of this country.
So even though Joe Biden lacks the moral authority to do so, he claims that simply questioning our judicial system is a threat to democracy.
Don't ask questions.
And remember, folks, Joe Biden claims that no one is above the law, but at the same time, he constantly brags that he's ignoring the Supreme Court's decision that was supposed to prevent him from forgiving billions of dollars in student debt.
Within a 24-hour period, Joe Biden says we have to respect the judicial system, absolute respect. And yet he tweets, and the centerpiece of all of his speeches right now is, the Supreme Court tried to stop me, but I did it anyway on student loans. So I'm just wondering, which part of the judicial system do we have to respect?
The Supreme Court of the United States blocked me, but they didn't stop me.
Does it not offend you that the President of the United States is usurping your authority?
I would argue that the offense here probably is Donald Trump. The fact that
Just remember, folks, no one is above the law, unless you're a Democrat who wants to give the middle finger to a Supreme Court ruling. And whatever you do, don't ask Joe Biden if he has anything to do with the lawfare against Trump, because you might just get an answer.
Donald Trump refers to himself as a political prisoner and blames you directly. What's your response to that, sir?
And on that revealing note, that's it for now. Follow me on X at Don't Walk Run, and while you're at it, please subscribe to the channel. As always, thanks for tuning in, and I hope to see you next time, if there is next time.